Hello, I'm Chuck Wolf, Chief Executive for Charles J. Wolf Associates, LLC. As a motivational speaker and a leadership consultant and executive coach and trainer, I often work with very successful people in their companies. Since many can't afford a professional, I volunteer to host a radio talk show called The Emotion Roadmap, Take the Wheel and Control How You Feel, on a nonprofit community radio station in Bridgeport, Connecticut, WPKN. My reason for doing the show is to share with as many people as possible this wonderful process for helping people manage their own emotions and their relationships with others. My goal is for everyone listening to learn to use the Emotion Roadmap to make life better. As you listen to me, help others, I hope you are also learning. As a Simsbury resident, I'm delighted to be able to make the show available through Simsbury TV. To learn more, go to my website, www.emotionroadmap.com. Thank you for listening and watching.
This is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. You're on the air with me, with Chuck Wolf on the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. This is another warm summer day in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We're broadcasting here from WPKN 89.5 FM in Bridgeport, serving Fairfield, New Haven, and Litchfield counties in Connecticut and Suffolk County in New York. Communities around the world via podcast and streaming. You can find us on the web if you like the shows you're listening to, including the Emotion Roadmap. Tell your friends about us, and they can listen on WPKN.org in case they're not in our local listening area. So, this show is about helping people deal with emotionally challenging situations, and there are no lack of emotionally challenging situations as I think about each show, as I prepare for each show. I think about, so what's today's topic? And I'm excited to tell you that I've mentioned this a couple of times in recent shows that I had a guest that I was hoping to interview. She's a friend of mine, a woman named Geetu Barwani from the United Kingdom, and she and I had a chance to talk the other day and had a really lovely interview with her about her new book called Emotional Resilience. And what's really interesting is you're going to hear that interview next week. So next week's show, I'm going to have the interview that I taped ahead of time with Geetu on emotional resilience and a little bit about emotional resilience. So what does it take when you're knocked down and kind of beaten up a little bit and pushed down or insulted or disrespected or just made to feel really, really badly about something in your life? Or do you have a loss of a job or something meaningful that you just feel like, you're having a hard time turning around, or a relationship that goes sour and you can't get it back and you're feeling terrible about it and you're really upset. And then what does it take to turn that around? Well, of course, the whole show of the Emotion Roadmap, which we're on for now 6 years. So the show is all about helping you understand how much power you actually have with your own emotional control. You have the ability, we all do, to change how we feel, to impact on situations where the feelings we're having aren't helpful. Now, that's not the repression of feelings. There are feelings that have a lot to do with, the negative side of life, like sadness or loneliness or embarrassment or shame or depression. I mean, there's a lot of feelings that have to do with a negative side of life. And those sometimes are appropriate. We do something we're embarrassed about. It's fine to be embarrassed for a period of time, but not to let it linger. It's, sadness is perfectly appropriate when we've lost something or someone who is or what is really important to us. And sadness is the appropriate response to that. But sadness that lingers and stays with us past a reasonable period of time is no longer helpful. Or sometimes we get angry at injustice, at something that's quite unfair. And we want to react to it, and we know this is not the battle we can win. But we do want to find some way to influence injustice, even when it's not something we can confront immediately. And yet, what do we do with that anger? How do we manage that anger that we're feeling inside? Because anger is an appropriate response to injustice. So what do you do with feelings? Where do we learn about this? How do we learn to be smarter about how we deal with emotions? So, a number of years ago in the 1990s, there were some really, really interesting psychologists who would come up with some research that they discovered that we actually have emotional abilities, and these abilities matter. And these are abilities to identify emotions in ourselves and others, to use emotions intelligently, to understand how the emotions we feel impact what we do and what we think, and also to understand how emotions work in case we want to do change what we are feeling or what someone else is feeling. And also this idea of managing emotions, this whole idea of how do we relate to others and how do we manage what we're feeling inside ourselves. All of that is this new science that's emerged in the last 20 or so years called emotional intelligence. And my colleague and friend Geetu Barwani is one of those early pioneers. She and I worked together the late 1990s. We began working somewhat in the same realm, in the same world, and we got to know each other and like each other and have stayed in touch for all these years. We're both members of something called the Emotional Intelligence Consortium. It's actually called the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. It's kind of a neat organization of experts in the field of emotional intelligence and companies that are interested in learning about that research firsthand when it's just becoming available. In fact, if anybody is interested in, if anybody out there is involved in leading a company of their own or in a big company where you have influence and you want to be part of this consortium, the consortium has an opportunity. They don't open up too often, but they have an opportunity for 1 or 2 new members. And if you'd like to be a part of that, let me know. You can call into the show. You can contact me. My email is cjwolfe@cjwolfe.com. So if you know the show, I'm Chuck Wolf. And my email is just my initials, CJ for Charles James. Last name is Wolf, WOLFE. CJWOLFE@cjwolfe.com. Write to me if you have an interest in belonging to the consortium. They meet twice a year. They have leading researchers come and present their findings. So if you want that competitive advantage to know what people are going to be talking about in the next several years, but you want to know about it firsthand and be able to interact with some of the best experts in the world, including people like Dan Goleman and Geetu Barwani, my friend, and Rick Aberman, who's the sports psychologist for the University of Minnesota and for the Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings. We have all these great people that come to this. It's not a large group, though. It's only around 30 to 40 people that come twice a year to Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we have these meetings that are all about people kind of updating each other with, what they're working on, and then always a presenter. And this coming October, I was involved with helping to pick the presenter, and it's going to be Mark Brackett, who is another good friend and colleague from the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale University. Mark is the director for the Center of Emotional Intelligence at Yale University. If you look up the consortium's website, the Emotional Intelligence Consortium's website, you will see 4 interviews that I've done on this show that are on their homepage. I've done interviews with Mark Brackett that I just mentioned, with Peter Salovey, and Peter Salovey is the president of Yale University, one of the pioneers in the field of emotional intelligence. Jack Mayer, another pioneer in the field of emotional intelligence. Carrie Chernis, who is the director of the Center for the Consortium. Carrie is the main person involved in helping to create and run the meetings. And he's also currently the chairman of the psychology department at Rutgers University. A lot of really fascinating people. So if you have an interest in possibly joining, there's cost to it for any business that wants to join. Well worth it, though, if you believe in knowing ahead of time where we are going with research in this field of emotional intelligence. If you want to make that part of your organizational life, let me know. It's a nonprofit, and it meets twice a year in Cambridge, in a lovely place, typically somewhere near the Prudential Center in Boston. And you can reach me at CJWOLFE at CJWOLFE.com. Well, I'm going to actually talk a little bit about the Center for Emotional Intelligence today, but I also want to talk about this idea of what Gitu has written about. Gitu's book that I'm going to be talking to her about next week. I've already actually had the conversation, but you'll hear it next week on this station at 12 o'clock. The show, The Emotion Roadmap, is on the first, second, and fourth Wednesdays of each month from 12 to 1 p.m. on WPKN.org. One of the greatest little independent radio stations you'll ever hear, if not the best. And so we're hoping that you get a chance to listen to this and learn about this idea of the title of her book, which is Emotional Resilience. Now, why is emotional resilience important? For a lot of reasons, right? I don't know what concerns you the most. Maybe it's college debt. Maybe it's a conflict you're facing. Maybe it's presidential politics, and you're worried about if either one of the two major candidates are going to be president. Oh my God! I'm not sure how you feel about any of the candidates. There's also a Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, and a Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson. But so maybe politics is something that you're finding challenging. Maybe you're getting close to retirement and worried about whether you saved enough money. Maybe you're worried about all the, safety. Maybe you're worried about the number of proliferation of guns that are out there, or people that are terrorists that are out there, or just mass shooters that are out there. That there's certainly things that are on people's minds that are really, really challenging emotionally. Just to kind of wake up in the day and try to avoid the news so that you can go about your business and hopefully have a decent day. But maybe even the day is tough for you because you're dealing with tremendous challenges in the workplace, or this conflict with the person you work for, or people that work for you or that you work with. Maybe there's struggles inside your relationships with people that that are part of your family or that you love but you're struggling to like. There's all kinds of things that we find emotionally challenging. So how do we bounce back up every morning with energy and with a smile on our face, ready to tackle the day and feel good about life? How do we do that? Well, this whole idea of being smart about emotions is what the show's been about for the past 6 years. I mean, the whole idea of an emotion roadmap is to think about what you are feeling and to try and determine what it would take to feel something different, better, more ideal. How do you do that? That's what my show's about. And if you listen regularly, if you're a new listener and you haven't heard the show before, if you listen regularly, you'll know that my intent is to help people learn how to do the things that I've learned, which is to manage my own emotions. I got a lovely compliment from my wife the other day. She said, since you've been doing that show and you've been doing this work, I got to say, you are more emotionally intelligent. How great was that? Now, you got to understand, I didn't necessarily start at a high level, so it may not be as good as you're thinking. But no, actually, it is. It's pretty good these days. So I'm so much smarter now. I really get when my initial reaction is to say something snarky, or sarcastic, or if somebody insults me, to just jump right back in and insult back, or if somebody disagrees with me, to tell them why they're wrong and I'm right. I mean, not that I did a lot of that, but I do that on occasion. I do it so little these days because I really feel like I've learned to understand when my own emotions, when internally I'm being challenged by things, that has an impact on me. And sometimes I'll say things that I really shouldn't, that are damaging to a relationship. And I catch myself so often being so much smarter about these things these days. In part because, when you have to teach something, you have to get better at it than just the person who's learning it. So every week when I'm on the radio, I'm hoping to teach one of you, two of you, hundreds of you, thousands of you, millions of you, how to be smarter about how you deal with emotionally challenging situations. And next week's show, I'm really pleased to say, has a lot of great tips in it. Now, you don't have to wait for the show because you can order Gitu's book on Amazon.com. You can also go to her website, EI World, E for emotional, I for intelligence, World. Again, she's, I think I mentioned this, she's from the United Kingdom, so you might see it with UK at the end when you Google EI World. And you can order it from there, or you can order the book from Amazon. But it's called Emotional Resilience, and it's the idea of Juan Guitu's an expert in this idea of emotional intelligence. In fact, you'll hear me say this next week, but I'll tell you now. I have given her one of her first books. I think it was called Emotionally Intelligent Living. I gave one of her first books as gifts to clients on around Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa time. When it was gift giving time, I thought to myself, she's a friend. I got to review her first book and have some impact on a few things that she wrote. But it was just a really nice book with her voice in it. This book has less of Guitu in it and more about just practical tips, some research, lots of links to more information. She said the book was much larger when she first wrote it, but the publisher said, you really can't sell a book that big. Yeah, but what you can do is you can offer people who want to know more about a particular topic or subject, places where they can go and get more information about that topic. And so the book kind of like brings technology in with the book. The book is also available as an audio book. So you can order it. It's called Emotional Resilience, and she's an expert in emotional intelligence, and she began looking at this idea of resilience. I can tell you some interesting information about resilience. It's a really fascinating concept. A number of years ago, I was doing some research on stress management. And it was a long time ago when I was at Harvard Business School. And one of the things that I discovered was that there were these psychiatrists, Holmes, Holmes, and Ray, Rahe, that had discovered that certain events in life, even positive events, at times have a stressful impact. Kind of a funny note about that is one of the things that that the authors discovered was that going to jail. They gave each of these events that happened in your life a valence, a weighting, a number, if you will. And they said that one of the highest numbers they gave was like 100 points. And they gave 100 points for going to jail. So that if you had just recently gone to jail and that happened in your life within the last 6 months or something and you're in jail, that was 100 points of stress. But also 100 points of stress was when you got married. It was the same balance. Because even good stress, if you will, because you're married to someone you love and, hopefully it's all off to a great start, but you have to now change a number of things. And life can be incredibly stressful. So they gave that 100 points too. But anyway, the idea was that they had a whole bunch of list of events that they had discovered through research that had, meaningful impact on your ability to handle things. And the more stress you had, the more difficult and challenging it became. That kind of makes sense, right? But so they said when you have over like 300 points within 6 months to a year, things happening that were ongoing, that was stressful, that oftentimes people ended up getting sick, physically ill, or even mentally ill. So if you have a lot of stress in your life right now, you're pushing yourself to the point of maybe where you're becoming unhealthy in some way. Except, and this is what's so interesting, except that there were some people that had 500 points and they seemed as healthy as could be. And they discovered that there's a whole group of people that seem to be able to be stress immune, if you will. And they tried to understand what the difference was. And they discovered this idea of resilience. This idea that resilience, the ability to bounce back up, to deal with whatever comes, the confidence to handle anything and everything, helps people to deal with challenging situations. Now, I think one of the great tools, it sounds self-serving, I guess, but I think one of the great tools is this emotion roadmap that I've created that helps people to deal with challenging situations. Now, one of the things I love about my show, and I haven't even given the number out yet, and it's 12:20 just about, I want to tell you that the show is about helping you. So if you want to call me and talk to me about some kind of challenge that you have. Maybe it's causing stress in some ways for you, but in any case, it's difficult. It maybe has to do with conflict, with change, with all kinds of things that are confounding you, that are causing you to be uncertain about how to proceed. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that, because my experience in my professional life as a leadership consultant is all about helping smart people become unstuck when there's emotional challenges at play. And folks, you don't often think of them as emotional challenges, but almost everything where you may be stuck right now has strong emotion attached to it. Good problem solvers, good critical thinkers, they fly through things that don't have a lot of strong emotion in them. They make problems disappear. They're called in when there's a critical thinking need that has but a challenging situation. They're experts at turning things around. And you may be one of those people, but you can become very stuck when there's something emotional that's bothersome and upsetting to you, and you're worried about it. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have, and you're worried about it being escalated, becoming confrontational instead of helpful and productive. And my show's about you dealing with the idea of being willing to make a call to me to get some help, so that everybody out there that's listening is learning. They're learning about this emotion roadmap, which simply is, when you've got a challenge, we talk about the challenge, and then I ask you, how are you feeling right now? And if there's anybody key that you're dealing with or about to deal with, how is he or she or they feeling right now? Now, we realize, we don't know for sure if you're going to get that right, but chances are you got to handle someone on it, and I can help you with it. And then I ask you, so if you could make magic happen, what would be ideal to feel? What would be the best feelings for what you're trying to get done? And I help you with that too. And then so we're looking at, so what are you feeling? And what would be ideal to feel? And if I could help you make the magic, how do I get you to feel the way you want to feel, you need to feel? What would be ideal to feel? And how do I help you do that for anybody else that's involved, to create those feelings in those other people? How do I help you do that? And in helping you do that, it helps everybody learn how this works. So if you got something on your mind and you want to call, the number, I'm going to give it to you a few times so you get it. I'll give people a chance to call, because I actually like having a lot of callers. I obviously got a lot to say today, but I do like having you call. And I think when you call, it gets so much more interesting. 203-336-9756. 203-336-9756. I do want to mention that this show is also available. You can see it on YouTube. If you go to Simsbury Community TV, Simsbury, Simsbury, Community TV. You just Google that. Their site comes up. And Simsbury is the town I live in Connecticut. And I'm filming as we speak. I'm filming this show right now. And they will see it on their local TV channel, their local TV cable channel. But they also, Simsbury Community Television makes it available on YouTube. So if you go to Simsbury Community TV and you get to their site and you do a search on, you just type in Emotion Roadmap, and my shows come up. And you can watch me. The idea of watching me is appealing to some people, and it's nice to be on YouTube, and I really appreciate it. I do want to mention to the group in Simsbury that the show with Gitu was not filmed, because we did that on just an audio line. And so if you want to hear the show on emotional resilience in a week, you can go to a website. I'll give you the website. It's called PRX, and it stands for Public Radio Exchange. So by the time you see this on TV, you can be able to go to prx.org and type in Emotion Roadmap, and you should be able to see it. You'll see a bunch of shows, so you may have to scroll down to find emotional resilience. You may want to listen to some other shows, but anyway, that's where you'll hear the show with Gitu. So that's one way to find it. So anyway, that's about the YouTube and the connection if you want to watch this on TV. I also want to give the number out again in case you got something you want to call about. And people call about all kinds of things. Sometimes it's a relationship at work with a manager. I got a couple things that I'll talk about work too today if I don't hear from anybody. But I always like to get a phone call. So 203-336-9756. Now, maybe you're not struggling with something, but maybe you've got a story about a time you were resilient. I'd love to hear that too. Sometime where you had something difficult happen and you were able to bounce back. The idea of resilience is being able to bounce back and deal with challenging situations without letting them knock you down and keep you down. Things are going to knock you down in life. We all know that. We've all been knocked down. It's how we deal with adversity that really shows character, develops character. So you got a story like that, I'd love to hear that as well. 203-336-9756. So while I'm waiting for that, a couple things to talk to you about is in business, and then I got a couple of neat things about a school situation to tell you about as well. So in business, a couple of things that I've heard recently that a bit disconcerting for some of the people I'm working with is about change management. You've all probably heard this idea of trying to deal with change in some way or another. If you're in big companies, you may have heard of it a lot, way too much perhaps. But even if you haven't, you know that change is happening all around us. Some remarkable things with change are really good things. Like we were trying, for instance, to locate someone, and we knew the person's, someone had left a phone in a car, and the phone was on. And we were trying to locate where the car was, where the person was. They weren't answering their phone. But we were able to it was an Apple phone, and somebody else had an Apple phone. And Apple automatically has this ability where if the phones are on, you can log into the other person's Apple phone with your Apple ID and password, and you can locate where your phone is. Great thing to know in case you ever lose your phone and it's on. You can actually locate where your phone is, and we can locate where the car was and so forth. So technology is giving us, good tools and the ability to do things that we never could before in very important ways. But also changes sometimes comes so fast, and there's so many, it's just overwhelming. And so how do you adapt to change? And there's lots of companies that want to make change happen. It's like a big deal in companies to have a change process in place, to have a change initiative, a change intervention. And yet people want to do it so much faster than it's possible to get it done. Just think about yourself for a moment. Have you ever tried to change one thing about yourself that you knew you wanted to change? You had a vision for what you'd like to see that would be different. Maybe it's about losing weight. Maybe it's about drinking less, smoking less, being more on time, less of a procrastinator. There's all kinds of things that we often know that we should be doing different. And so we put a plan in place to make this kind of change. And then the plan doesn't work. It's not shocking, right? Because so many of us, whether it's a New Year's Eve resolution or it's a legitimate plan because we went to the doctor and the doctor said, hey, listen, if you don't do something different about some of these habits you have, you're making yourself really unhealthy and you're going to be very sick soon. And even sometimes with that kind of message, we don't respond. So how easy then would it be for an entire organization to change the way they habitually act, the way that they work? I mean, you're compounding what one person struggles with just to change a habit they know they should change with a combination of all kinds of people that are involved with having a major change happen that maybe a lot of them don't even want or don't understand. Now, it's all possible, and there are a lot of really expert consultants, and if you want to know more about this, I'd say look up the man named John Kotter, Kotter. I used to work in an office next to John at Harvard Business School a long time ago. And John has written some absolutely brilliant writings about how change needs to work. And one of the things that's been so interesting to me over the years is that John was a data geek, and that simply means that he really responded to metrics, measurement, analysis. It was really, really amazing the time that he took to look at data and how he felt data was what you would drive change. And he talked a lot about how you track data and how you watch data and how you use data to help change happen. And he was brilliant at it. And he always thought that, the emotional part of it was part of it. And he talked a bit about how you got people on board with you and so forth. But over the years, he has become much, much more focused on the emotional end, because when change doesn't happen, even with excellent analytical reviews of data that's happening in an organization, you gotta understand emotionally what's going on for the people that are being impacted, the people that are driving the change, the people that are being impacted by the change, or the people that are going to be impacted by the change and simply don't know what's coming. So I looked at this change management plan that was part of something with someone I'm coaching, and I thought, my goodness, what a great opportunity. They were being an opportunity to deal with change as a lead in this major project. And I thought, that's what a great job. Now, most change management books, templates, consulting tools will tell you that change often takes several years, maybe even 5 years, 3 to 5 years to change an entire culture for a big company. And often it gets modified along the way because, you lay out some plans and maybe the change you wanted 6 months ago isn't necessarily exactly what you really need as you get somewhat into it and you realize you got to change it along the way. Or something in the government, regulations that impact your organization have made a major change to what you do. And so your vision for what you wanted, which may have been great, isn't really going to work so well anymore because of the new regulations that are impacting your world. Or new technology. There's a breakthrough in technology. Or there's a market competition that showed up from a place that you didn't expect, that you didn't understand. Or there's new products that are challenging there's so many things that can impact all this stuff. So one of the things that I looked at was that this change program was supposed to happen in 8 weeks. And I thought, whoa, I don't see that happening. And being the lead for that is like a danger zone for the person I'm working with. So how do you find out what you can really do in 8 weeks if that's the goal? Or is 8 weeks just like a milestone and I'm not reading it right? There's just a lot of things that you want to check out on. So part of this is all about understanding, how do you respond emotionally? The person was excited about the new opportunity. It's going to be a promotion. There's going to be more pay. But what if it's an impossible job? Emotionally, how do you say yes, but, and not offend anybody that wants to give this to you? Or yes, and we can't really do it the way you want. Again, there's emotional challenges everywhere. So you got something going on around change and you want to call, give me a call at 203-336-9756. And if you're out there and you're a senior leader in an organization and you want to make change happen and you want to make it happen really fast, I think get yourself a little education. Don't just take my word for it. Get a book by Rosabeth Moss Kanter. Look at John Carter's book. These are both people from Harvard Business School that know a lot about these things. And you'll find that these ideas are not hard to visualize, but they are incredibly challenging to implement. And it takes time and great thought and discipline and, interestingly enough, resilience. So, change. If you want to talk about changes that are going on in your world and how you're having to adapt to them, or if you're a leader of change and you want to chat a bit about that, give me a call. I think we got a first caller. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Carla Miller.
Hi, Carla. How you doing?
Good.
You want to turn your radio down, I guess? Hello? Not sure, Carla, but I can't hear you. Not sure what happened. Because I could
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Uh-huh.
Okay. Calling because I just have a burning question.
Huh. Sounds like you're on a cell and the signal's not great where you are, because you're breaking up.
All right, I'll call back. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Bye-bye.
No problem. Thank you.
That was really strange because, Carla, for whatever reason, when you said I can call back, and then you were perfectly clear, but when you started to talk a minute ago, then couldn't hear you. So that's. I'm sorry. I hope you have a place you can call back from where you have a better signal. Be intrigued to know what you're calling about. So probably about change of some kind. So I was talking about that. Another thing that's happening in our world today that's really challenging has to do with prejudice and bias in race relations, right? And I'm no expert on race relations. I am an expert on people's feelings about things, and so I can talk a little bit about it from that angle. But it was sometimes we're not really aware when we have prejudice. I mean, a lot of people like to think of themselves as unbiased. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, there was certainly bias in my home. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was mean-spirited. I just think, what we focused on was who's like us and who's different. And I think everybody kind of does that. They kind of like, here's the neighborhood I grew up in that's familiar. Here's the people I went to church or synagogue or mosque with, and this is kind of who I know. Here's the people that I go out and hang out at the community center with. Here's where I went to the YMCA or some other kind of like place where there were people that were like me. And we start to see people who are similar, and then we notice that other people aren't the same as us. And somehow, some way, that becomes a little discriminating. We don't necessarily want to be with somebody who doesn't think the way we think, doesn't act the way we act, doesn't look the way we look, doesn't pray the way we pray. And we start to have a focus on differences. So sometimes that shows up in different ways. I was talking to someone who had to do with a lot of, some outplacement, trying to find jobs for people who, at some point are probably going to be laid off. And this young man was working very hard to try and do all that he could to find placements within his company for people that he thought were really talented. It just, the business wasn't doing as well as they had hoped, and there was going to be layoffs, and that's just real life. And he had sent this woman who was an African American. Well, actually, she wasn't African American. I'm sorry. She was from the Caribbean, and but she was black, and she went to a place where the person that was interviewing her was someone that the man had a great relationship with and said, this is one of my best performers. And yet when he heard how the interview process went down, he was very upset because this woman was never given a chance. And, we don't really know if it was about prejudice, but it sounded like it was. And yet my guess is, listening to the conversations about this, that the woman who interviewed this woman from the Caribbean probably had no idea she was prejudiced and would really be upset if you said that to her. And yet, it sure looked like that was a piece of what happened when, the interview didn't go well. So, sometimes you want to just kind of recognize when somebody's different than you, how do I feel about those differences? And, the fact that they're different may be where you initially can't help but focus. And yet, what if you really were conscious about whenever you were with somebody that was different than the people you grew up with, and the people that you hung out with, and the people that you prayed with, went to dinner with, went to the ball game with, whatever it might be. When they're different, try to focus on where are we similar? And how are the differences I might have with this person possibly helpful to me and to others in my company, business, department, whatever. So it's not like we don't have issues internally inside of us that are challenging emotionally. We do. We all do. It's what do we do about them? How do we recognize them? How do we not get defensive? How do we really embrace this idea of difference as valuable? That we want to respect differences, care about differences, and yet also, at the same time, look for people that seem to be different for commonalities. what's so interesting to me is when you can get past any initial blocks that you might have, that you might have grown up with, and you see a person who looks maybe, appears maybe different than you. Sometimes you find out, you know what? They grew up with some similar values to you. Some very similar values to you. Now, at the risk of some controversy, I'll raise this just to point this out. Melania Trump was criticized for plagiarizing part of Michelle Obama's speech. And I don't want to get into the Trump haters or the Hillary haters or Barack haters or any, because, as soon as you talk politics, you get people's crazy, crazy stuff comes up for folks. But what I want to point out is that when she picked the language that was the language from Michelle Obama's speech about the value of hard work, about the value of family, about the value of persistence, it wasn't like Michelle Obama was the first person to talk about those kind of things, right? She wasn't the first person to say she had those values. But Melania Trump, coming from another country, from another culture, not born in America, and Michelle Obama, born in America, but from a very, very different background, and yet they have similar values. Forget the thing about plagiarism just for a moment. Just think about the fact that they both wanted those words in their speeches because it said something about them. My point in making this metaphor, analogy, if you will, is simply to say that, you know what, if we can get past our skin color, our religion, race, whatever it might be, and just look at what is inside this person, we may find that we have more in common with this person than a heck of a lot of other people that look just like us, talk just like us, come from the same neighborhoods, were raised in similar homes, and yet our values are really, really tight with the person in front of me that came from a different part of the world. So part of my show is about helping people see the bigger picture, to think more broadly, to be more open, to be more honest about themselves and what goes on inside of them. Well, it looks like, Carly, you didn't find a phone to call me back from. Well, I hope you do, because we got a little bit of time left. I'd love to talk to you. So the number again is 203-336-9756. Or if somebody else would like to call, again, 203-336-9756. I'm waiting a minute just to see. It'd be nice to have a phone call or two before we close today. 203-336-9756. You want to talk about change? You want to talk about resilience? You want to talk about bouncing back from something? If you have a success story, if you want to talk about, trying to see the value in diversity and really living it and being open about it, all that's good stuff to talk about. So 203-336-9756. Okay, while I'm waiting for the phone to ring for somebody to be wildly courageous. Oh, there we go. Thanks. Hi, this is Chuck Wolf. You're on the air. Who am I talking to?
Carla Miller.
Oh, Carla, you found a place to call me from. Great.
I did. Thank you.
Oh, sure. What can I do for you?
I was calling because you actually led directly into the reason why I was calling. And I'd just like to talk about why you can't discuss religion or politics with friends. Or, like you just said, you don't want to get into any of that. Like, why can't people have discussions? And how do we learn others' values if we don't talk politics and religion?
Do you have a special situation where you'd like to with somebody and it's not working out? Or is it just more of a general question?
I live in a community which is a New Haven community, and I think wherever I lived in the world at this point, there's an unwillingness because of you might offend somebody, you might hurt somebody's feelings, but you might learn something, and you might get better as a result of having these conversations. And as long as we don't have these conversations, I don't see how healing is ever going to begin.
I think you're really saying something really important. I've talked a little bit about this in the past and in different ways. I think that, first of all, as I was mentioning, I think sometimes the focus is on how we're different. There's also something that's scientifically, there was some interesting research done a few years back that suggested that there are certain topics where people's brains just freeze. They actually were able to show that on an MRI, where people's brains actually just, it seems like a part of the brain just wasn't functioning, and it wasn't open to other points of view. Mm-hmm. Now, let me say that I think that some people are so steeped in what they believe, and they're somewhat obviously rigid about their beliefs. And so when somebody comes to them with evidence that contradicts those beliefs, it's very threatening. And so they shut down, or they become very aggressive in the way that they're talking with you, and to push back. And, it becomes like, oh my God, why do they ever bring it up? Right.
Right.
So one of the ways but there are also people that are, while they might be very committed to their belief system, they are also, to some degree, open to other people's ideas. They may not be willing to change necessarily, but they're willing to listen. And I actually enjoy conversations with people who are different thinkers than me when they're open and they're not just, where you can almost see it. If you see somebody shutting down, I think you got to walk away. If it's somebody you live with and you care about, and it's more important than that, then here's what I would say about somebody that you really want to be able to have a conversation with, that feels the need to tell you why they feel the way they do, even when they know it's different than you feel. And one of the ways that I suggest people handle that is that, this is true about any time, by the way, somebody's really passionate about something, or angry about something, or just really convinced about something, is that it's kind of like they're going so fast, if you get in their way, you're going to be run over. But if you just help them think through, talk about, be clear about what they're trying to say to you. So the way you do that is just kind of like, so, okay, you feel this way about your religion, and you just kind of repeat back to them what they said. Or you feel this way about the candidate that you're for because they, and you don't make stuff up. You just kind of say, because these are the things that you see in them. And they say, yeah, that's right. And then you say, and this is the way I would handle it, is there anything else you want to tell me about your candidate or your religion or whatever? And let them, until they're done, and let them, no, that's really everything. I really appreciate you listening. And then you can ask permission, and this actually works. Would it be okay if I tell you where I have some views about these things? I have a different candidate, I have a different religion, or I think differently about religion than you do, and can I ask you to just kind of listen to what I have to say? Because I've really heard what you had to say, right? And so I appreciate if you give me a couple of minutes, without interrupting, just let me talk to you a little bit about what I think is important. And then I think you have a good chance to have a conversation. It can get really dicey once you're into it, past that point. But at least you get time by listening to the other person and respecting their point of view, making sure they have nothing left that they need to say, and then asking, hey, would you mind if I told you why I feel a little differently than you do about these things, or maybe a lot differently? And would you give me a few moments, to make sure that I got a chance to say what I want to say? And the fascinating thing is when you actually allow yourself to listen really deeply to somebody else, the thing that scares people about that is because they might change. Mm-hmm. Or you might change. And sometimes that's frightening to people, because sometimes your religious beliefs are things you've had since day one. Your political beliefs might be, you were raised a Democrat and you'll be a Democrat in the day you die, and there really is no room to talk about a Republican, no matter who they are, or vice versa. And so, sometimes it's so threatening. But I think you can try and make peace with it by allowing and asking for time, and just being really respectful to the other point of view, and making sure they're done, and then offering what you think.
Well, I hope our communities at large are willing to engage in some of these practices, because without listening and without respecting other people's points of view and literally paying attention to the facts. I mean, there's some facts here. Not everything is debatable. and everyone has a different set of facts.
Yeah, you listen sometimes to the statistical facts that people will toss out, and I'm thinking of things like here's one for example, President Obama created millions of jobs since he's taken office, and everything's gotten better after the first 2 years when we were in dire straits. And then the other side of the coin is we have more people out of the workforce than ever before, and wages haven't gone up. I mean, so there are facts, but there's facts that support different arguments. And so, sometimes we kind of talk past each other. But again, I think
maybe both of those things are true.
Okay, right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then we need to work on solutions.
And I actually
those things can be true.
Okay. Do you think everybody would say okay to that? Or they would
No, I don't. I think nobody would say that. Everybody's either on the left or the right, not literally, but literally. And then if you walk in between and you try to come up with solutions to, I don't care what you believe in. If there's millions of people suffering, we need to find a common ground.
I agree with you.
And people just want to stick to their truths. And maybe your truth is right and my truth is right. But who's winning here? Nobody.
Right. So you want people focused on the future and what's to come and how we're going to make things better.
And actually, how much better we have gotten. I mean, like, there's no celebrations. Like, the fact that the earth is still green and the sun is still shining for everybody today is, I mean, we need to be grateful for the things that we do have instead of always harping on what hasn't happened, because we really have come a long way.
Yeah, as I said, there's lots of wonderful things happening and lots of terrible things happening, and what are you looking at?
Right? Is it half empty or half full? I mean, this is a lot. I'm sitting in my backyard right now, and like I feel like I'm the most grateful person in this world because I have a house, like, and it's just an amazing day for me because I'm sitting in my yard and I love my neighbors and I feel like I'm the happiest woman in America, right?
That's great.
But no one else knows what's going on in my world.
They don't have to for you to feel happy.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm still the happiest person in America. But when I have to get out in the world and choose left or right, then there becomes a battle.
Well, I think that so let me go a little bit further with that, because one of the things I was going to chat about today was there are wonderful things happening to make the world a better place. I don't, whether the glass is half full or half empty is really kind of hard to know at times, because depending on what you're looking at and what you're reading about and where your focus is, you could certainly feel one way or the other. And just looking outside of the beautiful day, I'm going to be spending some time with my daughter in a little while, and that's lovely. And we've just had a wonderful weekend with family and lots of nice things. And then you turn on the news and you see lots of people shutting each other down at these conventions.
Right.
And you feel like, wow, why doesn't anybody get it? But I think if the focus is, so what are the things we can do to make it even better? So whether the glass is full or empty doesn't make any difference whether or not, when we're focused on what can we do, we all agree where we need to focus and what needs to be better, and let's start working on that. And let's not stop arguing about who did what to whom when, and take a different kind of
mindful approach to living.
A resilient approach that says, okay, whatever's knocking us down right now, what do we need to do to get back up and make it better?
Right.
So let me tell you about something that's making things better, because I was going to do that anyway. This is, you ever hear the company Kleenex? It actually was,
yes.
Right? So Kleenex is actually a company. Some people think it's actually the same word as tissue, but Kleenex is a company. So Kleenex explores sadness and anxiety of moving from elementary to middle school. So Kleenex, because they're focused on when people are crying and you need Kleenex or tissues, they worked with the Center for Emotional Intelligence at Yale University to help middle school kids transition from elementary school to middle school. And they came up with some wonderful ways, and they have some examples that are on this website that you can look at, that just are things that parents can ask their kids. You don't have to have an intervention from Yale University about, Tell me about what you're excited about going to the new school. Tell me what you think you might learn. Who do you know that's been to the new school that has had some good experiences? And just trying to find ways to help people to understand emotionally how to deal better with things. Because I actually think this whole science of emotional intelligence is one of the glass half full things. I mean, and hopefully my show's part of that too. You know, the idea of teaching people how to be smarter about having conversations when you disagree and listening to each other deeply and not worrying about whether or not you might change what you think or believe because you've listened really hard to somebody and somebody said something that's moved you. I mean, why isn't that wonderful? Even though maybe you might feel bad. Well, I believed this for so long, and now I know it's wrong, but you know it's right now. Why isn't that a good thing? So
I called in to you about, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, and I was telling you about a red bird.
Okay,
that
I remember.
Always,
yeah, because I was talking about Blue Jays, right? Okay.
Yes, and like the next day, like I was going to call you back, but you weren't on the air, and like ever since I've had so many bluebirds, and I was like, that's an organic, authentic exchange. And then the young lady that called in after saying that, you know, her mother passed and she talked about a red bird that followed her through the woods over
right.
Like that was such a powerful moment. And it was like just good vibes. But that has like got me through a lot of dark moments. So if we create positive moments in our own life that are free, because the best things in life are still free, right?
Right. What we say and do for each other can be such kindness. I mean, we really can be.
Yes.
We really can be a blessing to each other, and we often aren't. But if we make a conscious effort at it, I think we can be.
Absolutely. And you talk about Kleenex, like since I was a little girl, like Cheerios make me happy when I see them. I always have to have a box of Cheerios. I think General Mills is a responsible, conscious organization that is, you know, helping America, and it has always helped America to be happier. At least it's helped me. I always say, why is the Cheerio box yellow?
It's interesting. It's just it's like the sun. You know, Cheerios is one of those. I actually like old westerns, and sometimes I'll watch something that's an old western from a long time ago, and you know they still have some of the old commercials as part of it on these cable stations, and they have Cheerio advertisements from, you know, the 1950s. Cheerios is one of those one of those products that's been around forever, and they're heart healthy on top of everything else. They're actually good for you.
And gluten free now. Like they're evolving as an organization, and that's what, you know, we all need to do is evolve as people. And I think your emotional roadmap helps to put people just on the map to understand that you do matter. You're on the map, and as long as you're still on the map, you have a chance to keep going in many different directions.
Well, Carl, I want to thank you for the call. I've got to go. I'm just a little over my time, actually.
Thank you, Chuck.
Well, I just want to say one thing to you because because next week I have this show on from somebody with England, so I just thought it was a perfect ending to say cheerio to you.
Cheerio and bluebirds fly, and have a good one. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody, thanks for listening. This is Chuck Wolf. You've been listening to the Emotion Roadmap. Take the wheel and control how you feel. And next week, I'll be an interview with Gitu Barwani. I want to thank Carla for the phone call and everybody else for listening. Have a great day. You all really appreciate your being a good listener and somebody that really appreciates the conversation and the dialogue. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.